Hey, what is up YouTube? Kolst here, and we are back for another card review for Showdown in the Badlands. This time it is Paladin, and let's just jump into it. I don't like long intros, and I assume neither do you. So the first one we have here is the Badland Bandits. This is a 6-mana legendary spell. Get 8 3/2 bandits with bonus effects. Any that can't fit in your hand are summoned instead. So if you're familiar with adventurers, bandits are basically adventurers, but they all have, different keywords, same kind of idea as those. It's the same keywords, I believe, the same 8 keywords. So it's basically, this is a reprint of Party Up in a way. They go into your hand. Get, again, means add to hand. To make this really good, you need to have some of them get played to the board. That would be the idea. So this card isn't just 6 mana do nothing. 6 mana do nothing is a little bit unforgiving. Sure, you might get like Rush and Divine Shield, Reborn, things that might help you catch up, but you just don't want to fall that far off board. So this restricts it a little bit, that you can't run this in like a super aggro deck, where it would be really good, but you just can't run this in like a super aggressive deck because you can't afford to do it if your hand is emptied already by turn 6. But I think nowadays in Arena, there's just so much value generation, obviously, that everyone's familiar with, that you don't need that many. If you get, even 2 to 3 summoned by this, it's really good. One thing to note is that if you play this on turn 6, it is going to fill your hand, so you're going to overdraw a card. That's something to pay attention to. You may want to be willing to do that. You probably would be willing to do it rather than delay this, but just something to keep in mind, that is a downside of it as well. But overall, it's a lot of tempo, and I mean, even if you're out of cards and you like draw this on 10 mana, hey, I mean, you still get to play 2 of them and you still get a lot more to do. So it's actually still not that bad in that situation. It's really just in the mid game. You're not going to play this. It's going to be really bad if your hand is basically already empty. I think that just won't happen very often. So I think in most decks, this card is very good, and especially if you know you have it. And since I released this since the talk about the new Arena rotation, you'll know that you have this in your deck because you got it pick 1. So you'll be able to draft around it and not draft hyper aggro. And then this is going to be really good for you most of the time. You just hope it doesn't get AoE'd, obviously, which is always going to be a threat with that kind of card. But next up, we move on to Living Horizon. This is a 10 mana Taunt Divine Shield. Costs 1 less for each other card in your hand. It's an elemental as well. So there's going to be a couple cards, which we'll talk about as well. But yeah, it's just another card that encourages you to have that bigger hand size. This is an epic. You won't see it as much, but yeah. As long as you have 4 cards in your hand, this is a better Sunwalker, and Sunwalker is still, it would be weak nowadays, but it's still fine, right? There's the potential as well, obviously, to get this as cheap as potentially 1 mana, but it's a little unrealistic. It's pretty reasonable, though, to expect you might be able to get this for 3 to 4 mana pretty often, and that's really good, especially if you fill up your hand with bandits or something, right? So that's something that you'd be able to potentially do, which would make this very, very good, especially if you have that particular combo, which you're going to be likely to do, actually, because of the pick 1 legendaries, and there's going to be high odds of getting that. So with that combo especially, it's going to be really, really good. Next up, we have Lawful Longarm. 5 mana, 1/5 Rush Lifesteal. Battlecry, gain +1 attack for each card in your hand. Again, it's the same synergy. This is pretty bad if you don't have any cards in your hand, but that, again, almost never happens, especially not by turn 5. As long as you get like, it's around the same break point where if you get like 3 to 4 cards in hand, you'd consider very good at that point. If you're playing these types of decks that have a lot of cards in your hand, you're going to be very happy to have a potentially large Rush Lifesteal that's going to heal you a lot of health immediately, right? Because it's a rush. If you are a more aggressive deck, especially a very aggressive deck, you just aren't going to draft this because you don't expect it to be good, and you don't care about the lifesteal anyway, right? So if you're a slower type of paladin, you will value this very, very highly. It's a common. You will see it a lot. The theme of this expansion is a whole lot of anti-aggro, lifesteal, taunt, or AoE removal. There's just a whole lot of it, so you're going to be seeing a lot of those kind of slower strategies as well. So next up, we have Lay Down the Law. 2 mana holy spell with tradable, and also the text, set a minion's attack and health to 1, quick draw, then deal 1 damage to it. Compared to a lot of the other quick draws, this is one you probably don't care about, because if you set something to a 1/1, you probably don't care that much. There's even certain situations where it's like if it's a giant death rattle minion, for example, one with a really impactful effect, you might not even want to kill it. You might prefer to just have it a 1/1 to effectively freeze the death rattle for a turn. So you might not even want the quick draw. And I mean, if it's there most of the time still, it's probably nice to have it. You'd mind it, but this is one where definitely compared to a lot of the other quick draws, which you really want the quick draw, this one you just don't really care. You'll just play this whenever you actually want this, because this is a completely overpowered card. Subdue was this card without the tradable and the quick draw, and that was an insanely good arena card. This is just, I mean, a lot of times it's going to be just a cheap assassinate with the tradable as well, so it's just, it's very, very strong, so you'll draft it basically every time. Next up, we have Holy Cowboy. 3 mana 4/3, Battlecry. Your next holy spell costs 2 less. And this is a common as well. So that last card was a common. So I mentioned it was a 2 mana. No, it's actually a 0 mana assassinate, my bad. But yeah. 3 mana 4/3s are kind of bad, but you'd be willing to do it because, I mean, this is really only a 1 mana 4/3 because every paladin really has holy spells. Maybe not that many, but like you're going to have holy spells. There's a risk that maybe you waste it on a secret if secrets are in rotation or something. There might only be like 1 mana holy spells, you know? So you might waste some of the benefit, but yeah, I mean, it's always going to be really strong. You wouldn't draft this over like super crazy powerful cards, but I mean, be pretty happy to draft this pretty highly because it's a 1 mana 4/3 with like cheat to potentially allow you to do combos even that might not even potentially aren't really supposed to be possible. So it can be very, very strong. You can stack them, by the way, so you could also make your holy spells cost 4 or 6 less as well. That can also be relevant. So yeah, it's going to be very, very powerful. Next up, we have Hi-Ho Silverwing. 2 mana 2/1 Divine Shield with Death Rattle, draw a holy spell. It's a little bit awkward. I mean, a 2 mana 2/1 Divine Shield is like slightly weak for a minion. It's like fine, right? You know, you'd expect a 2/2, but that doesn't really even matter that much, to be honest. But because you're also getting a draw and you're drawing a holy spells are generally very good. Potential to actually realize that mana cheat a lot faster than you otherwise would have been able to. That's really good. It's a little bit awkward that it's on a Divine Shield minion, which makes it just a really good silence target, but also it just delays the actual draw of a holy spell. That's what's actually very awkward about this card. It's just a very weird design. Hey, it does a lot for a card, so it's definitely essentially too much. It's a very good card, so you're going to draft it regardless. And I don't think there's Dragon's Energy currently, not in this set with Paladin, but there is in some previous sets that might be in rotation as well. Have to check what's in right now, but yeah, it's going to be good for other reasons as well, so it's a very good card. Next up, we have Deputization Aura. 3 mana holy spell. It's another one of those, not locations, but like, I forget what the term form actually is, but they're the cards that sit over your hero. It's your leftmost minion, has +3 attack and lifesteal, lasts 3 turns. You can't really push a whole lot of face damage, at least at once with this. I mean, you could potentially push at least like 9 damage over 3 turns if you can keep a board. But the idea of this would be a lot more if you can get a bunch of mains to stick, like you have a bunch of Badlands Bandits, for example, or you have rush minions or whatever, that you can potentially use this multiple times per turn. You're going to get an insane amount of value as far as clearing big boards, getting a lot of lifesteal that can basically make you unkillable for 3 turns, and even, you know, you can go from potentially near zero to 30 health with this kind of thing. It's very, very powerful in that way. It'd probably be a card you wouldn't want to draft a ton of because it still has some reliability on either being on board or having very specific things like rush. So you might not want to draft like a lot of these, but it just seems like a very, very powerful card to just have one of because it's so good in that situation where it's good that it would just be something it'd be worth having a copy of, I think. I could be wrong. You might actually be one to draft multiple, but it definitely seems like it would be, you know, the second one would be a lot weaker than the first, draft-wise at the very least. Next up, though, we have Showdown. 2 mana epic spell. Both players summon 3/3 outlaws. Oh, I thought this was 2. This is actually 3/3 outlaws. Interesting. And then give yours rush. So this is a weird card because, I mean, there's 2 situations where this is good. The first one is where your opponent has actually a very small board, a lot of small minions that and no taunt or anything disrupt it. And then you can use yours to value trade. And then their guys have to trade back and they don't have a lot of like an AoE to punish you for that and all that. It's a lot of conditions, right? Or you can clear theirs off immediately, but other than keeper strengths, it would be a little hard to do that, and you're not really maximizing the same way. Anyway, the point is I'm saying a lot of like weird conditions for that, and then the other condition is where they have a full board, so then you don't actually pay the downside, you just get a bunch of 3/3 rushes. But in that case, you're also probably losing, and this isn't doing enough to save you. So this card, I'm not really sure really what the exact idea of this is. As a result of that, it's something to add to random spell pools, I guess. I don't think you really would draft this. It just seems a little bit weird because it's really hard to plan on falling that far behind when this isn't really the proper card, because it doesn't work even with keeper strength exactly. So I don't really understand the whole idea of this. It just doesn't seem very good, unless I'm really missing something, but at least in Arena I don't think I am, so it just doesn't seem very good. Well, one thing that you would actually combo with, however, this is one thing to mention, is Prismatic Beam. This is 7 mana common spell, so you will see it a lot. It's deal 3 damage to all enemies, costs 1 less for each enemy minion. So, okay, that is one thing. That's the one thing I'm forgetting, I guess. Yeah. So you can do this to get a bunch of rushes, and then you also just board clear your opponent at the same time. That would be the idea. So I guess if you draft a whole bunch of this card and you see one of these, maybe that's a reasonable pick for that reason, but still a little sketchy. In any case though, I mean, this is a very good card. This is all enemies, it goes face, and anytime you would actually want to cast an AoE anyway, this is going to be relatively cheap. It's going to be probably more efficient than a Consecration. Consecration is obviously a fine Arena card as is. This is probably just better. So yeah, you would value this very, very highly. And then the last card we have here is Spirit of the Badlands. 3 mana 3/4 Undead Beast Battle Cry. If your deck has no duplicates, another Highlander card, get a permanent Mirage. And the permanent Mirage is at the start of your turn, transform into a copy of a minion in your deck. This stays in your hand. So basically, you don't have to, but every turn you'll have the option to just play a free copy of a random minion in your deck. Just another one of those things. Compared to like some of the other really powerful things like Rheostraza, this doesn't create like any weird like mana cheat, unless, I mean, I guess you could put cheap stuff in your deck theoretically, but most likely you're not really getting mana cheat or something. It's fair value, but it is infinite value essentially, so that is a lot of potential value. The upside compared to like Rheostraza, you have to play a big like 8 mana 8/8 or something, whatever it is, and where you just play this on curve, right? And then you just have big guaranteed infinite value if you happen to, I guess you won't have a Titan anymore because you can't draft Titans anymore to Arena, so you don't have that upside, but still you might be able to get really big copies of really powerful cards in your deck potentially as well out of that Mirage. So it's definitely a powerful effect. It's just, it has to compete in the legendary slot, so there are better legendaries probably, but especially if you don't know if you need value nowadays because you're picking at pick 1, so you don't know what your deck's going to be. So it's something you can try to build around and just try to get some really good minions, because it only copies minions. But I mean, you tend to do that anyway, so I don't know. It's a little bit weird. But yeah, at least having the potential value, you would know that you wouldn't need to draft white as much value. But it's an interesting card for sure. And with that is it for this review. Appreciate everyone hanging out as always. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think, but appreciate everyone hanging out. We'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.